talk a bit about growth. And this has been a theme throughout NTI, your perspective on the standards, your perspective on teaching and learning, your perspective even on the assessments, perhaps your perspective on evaluation, your perspective on whether or not you're excited or dreadful every time you get up in the morning is probably tied to your vision of growth and whether or not feedback is an opportunity to grow or an opportunity to feel judged. And that's really a core value that we have to navigate each, as Kate mentioned, in our soul, in our being. We have to navigate whether feedback is viewed as an opportunity to grow or an opportunity to feel judged. And that's the message we have to think about with our students. We have to give them feedback. They have to struggle. It needs to be appropriate struggle. It needs to be age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate struggle. But they have to struggle. Because anytime you start something new, anytime you start something worthwhile, it's always a struggle in the beginning, whether you're learning a new language, whether you're reading a new book with lots of characters, whether you're learning a new sport, whether you're learning a new game, it doesn't matter. You struggle in the beginning, but then over time, you become more and more fluent. And over time, that fluency starts to feel better and better. So if you're a long-distance runner, it's horrible in the beginning, but at the end, you can't stop doing it because it feels good. And it's a different kind of feel good. It's not that short-term, superfluous feeling good, but it's that deep, long, I'm in it for the long haul feel good because I know what my goals are and I know what I'm trying to do. And that's very much about feedback and growth because we need our students to feel comfortable with getting feedback that they need to get a little bit better, a little bit better. Of course, we need to encourage their strengths, but we need to give them honest feedback about where they need to grow. Because if they don't struggle in 4th grade, or they don't struggle in 7th grade, when they're surrounded by caring teachers, they're going to struggle after they finish school. They're going to struggle after school finishes with them, and they can't get the jobs that they need for a livable wage with meaningful opportunities for advancement, or they can't get into the college that they want, or they get into college and they have to pay for remediation. Unfortunately, that life is present for way too many of our students. So it's much, much better for students to struggle early. Struggle so they develop those meaningful foundational skills, struggle while they're surrounded by teachers, and know that feedback is the path to fluency and joy. Feedback is not about judgment, or at least it should not be. So as we think about next steps and what does a post-Race to the Top set of supports look like, one of the questions is, what is the proper role of the state? Should the state just retreat back to its original position of, in this building, in this town, and we just kind of tell you what to do every once in a while? Or should the state continue to work hand in hand with the people who have the incredibly difficult job of making this happen in classes? My work means nothing unless I'm successful in supporting your work. And we really mean that, and everyone should mean that. Everyone, to the extent that you're not with kids in classrooms, your work is meaningful only to the extent that you support kids in classrooms. So what should the role of the state be in that work? We have a couple of things that we need to think through. One is we have this site called Engage New York that has this incredible brand recognition right now. We have 20,000 people a day come to Engage New York, and they don't just come and leave. We have stats that they stick around, average, for like 5 minutes or so, which sounds like a short period of time, but you do not get websites with those kind of stickiness stats where people stick around for a while, which means that if someone's sticking around for 5 minutes, that means a lot of people are sticking around for way longer than 5 minutes, and of course, some people are just leaving after they come. But we've had over 8 million unique users. We've had over 100 million downloads, page views on our site. So what are we going to do with Engage New York? How do we keep it relevant? How do we keep it fresh? I mentioned the content before. Keeping those modules fresh and up to date and having them grow as we grow and having them get better as we get better is not going to be an easy challenge, and we cannot do it alone. So we have to figure out what the right governance structure is to make sure that those modules, to the extent that people are using them, and it seems that people are using them, they stay fresh. Every time somebody takes the modules and goes their own way, That's a fork. I talked about fork yesterday, and somebody said through the comments, what's a fork? It means two different people have gone in two different directions, a fork in the road. And that's fine, but every time we fork, then we lose the ability to influence a broader group of people to benefit from the fork that we've taken. So we need to think about that. How do we upgrade the modules? How do we post those upgrades? And so on. We do have communities. I know we've been saying this for a few years now, but we do have communities coming to Engage New York where you will be able to log in. It's planned to roll out this fall. You will be able to log in using your current account to access your current roster reports. And then that is potentially one way to share the work that you're doing. If you've made some upgrades, you can create a community of people who care about those upgrades, and you can share it so we can all stay connected. But we need to think about that. We need to think about the curation of the content, how to make it properly organized, how to keep it easy to find stuff, because what happens is we update the site and then a whole lot of more stuff comes, and then we can't find the stuff anymore. So we need to constantly update the structure of the site. We need to get really good at tagging resources and having good search algorithms so you can find the stuff that you are looking for. But then there's the work of the professional development, and this is really the thorniest problem. Do we go back to the days where professional development, at least in the districts that I worked in, was largely constrained by district boundaries? Yes, of course, people have contracts where they can go off to PD opportunities off-site. They tend to do it on their own or maybe with a small group of people with them and so on. But by and large, professional development, those 175 hours that every principal and superintendent struggles to figure out what on earth they're going to do, tends to devolve, in a lot of places at least, into things that tend to be more administrative focused, tend to be more, grade level type meetings, as opposed to really the kind of rich professional growth that we hoped to create for you here. So the question is whether we go back to that, or you as consumers continue to demand something more, whether you demand it of your teacher center, you demand it of your BOCES, you demand it of any kind of regional support structure that you have in place, your professional organizations, you demand it of the state. But that's really the question. We've tried to create a consumer expectation from people in the field about what PD can look like. And the question, the big question of this grand experiment was, will you continue to demand that? And if you do demand that, will people be successful in providing that to you? Because teaching deserves no less. You deserve an opportunity to have time and space to think through these kinds of issues, to struggle through these kinds of issues, to push through these kinds of issues, to support your students to do the same. If we expect our students to push through difficulty and complexity, then we have to find a way to support teachers to push through difficulty and complexity. When I said goodbye to John King just a few months ago, I talked about this gap that we have, and this was very much a centerpiece of the John's commissionership. This gap between where we are and where we ought to be. And that is really, we talked about why we get up in the morning. I would hope that at least most of you get up in the morning because you're excited about helping to close that gap. You want to close that gap between where we are and where we ought to be in your local communities. You want to close it within your profession because we are not where we need to be in terms of supporting and celebrating teaching and teachers, and we want to close it in with our students because our students are not where they need to be. That's not an indictment, that's not a judgment, that is a call to action. The president just last week or so gave a speech in commemoration of the anniversary of the Selma March, and he also picked up on that theme of the gap between where we are and where we ought to be. And the president talked about this notion of the long march and how we are bloodied and bruised on the long march, but still we keep on marching. The march is long and the march must continue. It's not easy to realize that the work will never be done. The march is long and the march will continue. But it is empowering to know that you're doing the right work in the right way, in the right direction, with the right colleagues, hand in hand on that march, because our kids deserve better, Our families deserve better, our communities deserve better, and this is also about our state, our country, our economy, and our future. So please know that we are incredibly thankful that you have joined us hand in hand on that march. Know that the march will and must and has no choice but to continue, and know that the march only exists because of you and the people who continue to walk those footsteps forward time immemorial.